American road trip conjures up images of the open road, of a taste for freedom and a voyage of discovery. And I've come to experience a slice of that adventure here in America's capital region. The region comprises Maryland, Virginia and Washington DC, and I'm on the Colonial Parkway, one of many scenic byways that take you along historically significant roads. Dubbed the Historic Triangle, the Parkway takes in the three key towns of Yorktown, Williamsburg and my first port of call, historic Jamestown.
Jamestown was the first English settlement to survive in the New World. It was founded in 1607 and was the principal settlement of the colony for some 92 years.
We've been uncovering the James Fort, which was the earliest part of the settlement of Jamestown. We almost did a live exhibit on the property during the time that we're digging, and we've found the fort that was supposed to have been lost to the river. And the types of buildings we're finding are the government headquarters. We're finding barracks type buildings. There was something called a factory, was where trade went on, and just recently the original church.
And we're just in the process of uncovering that right now. It's exciting because that's where some important events occurred, like the first marriage in the colony between Anne Burris and John Leyden, and the famous marriage of Pocahontas and John Rolfe.
Now, usually when you go to a historical settlement, you might be able to go to a museum or have a look at some artefacts in cases. But what's different about James Fort is the archaeological dig is a kind of living exhibition with real people discovering what happened all those years ago. And just down the parkway is Jamestown Settlement, a reconstruction of James Fort as it would have appeared in the first few years of the 17th century, complete with artillery, barns, houses and ships.
Well, our first house basically represents a typical English yeoman farmhouse, a living place where 15, 20, maybe more workers and soldiers for the Virginia Company would be living. One of the pieces is a gun called a Saker. It's modeled after one that was probably built as part of Queen Elizabeth's build-up to repel the Spanish Armada. They were afraid of a Spanish Empire that had decided that the Virginia colony was a real threat to the Spanish colonies in New Spain, and it wasn't an idle threat.
Fortunately, there's very little threat from the Spanish nowadays, but back in the late 1700s, the enemy on the horizon was the British. The town of Williamsburg played a key role in the American Revolution and has been restored as a living museum, allowing visitors to completely immerse themselves in days of old.
Williamsburg was the second capital of Virginia and was the capital when Virginia was going through revolutions. So this is an important place for understanding the history of the Revolution and also something about the legacies that have come down to us ever since.
Now, what makes colonial Williamsburg all the more authentic is that people actually live here. And here is one of the local residents, Bart. He's an Ox, as you can see, and he's been here for 5 years. And another local resident is Bill Barker, or Mr. Jefferson, as he prefers to be called. Now, we're just going past some buildings. What's that one over there?
Well, this is the Raleigh Tavern, and this played an important part in the American Revolution because when the last royal governor of Virginia, John Murray, the Earl of Dunmore, dissolved the Virginia House of Burgesses, the Burgesses continued to meet, and they met right here in the Raleigh Tavern.
And pubs have always been a meeting place, haven't they?
A good revolution always begins in a pub, does it not?
And what about some of these other buildings? Are these all reconstructions or some of these originally from here?
Yes, there are a good 88 original buildings, and then we have well over 200, 300 buildings that have been completely rebuilt. We have the reconstruction of the coffee house that sits on the original foundation there.
And ahead of me is the Capitol building.
This is the reconstruction of the capital of colonial Virginia. In fact, that is where the House of Commons would have been represented in what were known as the Burgesses, the House of Burgesses, and then also included in there was the General Court.
But Williamsburg doesn't just offer the chance to indulge in some period costume dress-up and slap of the thigh hurrahs. Many of the people that work here are essential to keeping the art of the ancient guilds alive.
What we do here is we make 18th century objects to 18th century archaeological material, and all tradesmen and all trades in this town want to keep that standard up. So.
And people obviously come and buy shoes from you here. So can I have a look at some of your work?
Yes. However, what we make here is used by those who work here.
Ah, I see. Okay.
So, but we have many varieties here. We have from slippers to a cheaper shoe, which is very coarsely made, all the way to the finest, which would require you to have an overshoe with that for mud and dirt.
I have never seen anything like that before. And you make all these by hand?
My tools are over here by my bench.
Okay.
Probably the hardest tools to master are tools like this, the awl. And this is what we use to poke the holes with. But awls...
Oh, what, to thread through those?
Exactly.
Now, one of the things I have heard about shoes back in the day is there was no left or right. How does that work? Shoes
were made straight, but it was for economy reasons. Left and right shoes go back to the Romans, but it was cheaper to make them straight. After he has worn it, it wears to the right or to the left foot.
Ah, so you need to wear them in the rain, get them to mould.
It will mold to your foot.
And who knows, maybe even George Washington himself graced this humble cobbler's with General Rochambeau whilst planning his campaign against the British. They assembled their troops and, like me, made their way to Yorktown for the final assault on Lord Cornwallis in 1781 in the decisive battle of the American Revolutionary War. The views may not have changed much, but thankfully the roads are now a lot easier to navigate. But it's not all about the war. Indeed, in more peaceful times, the town was a major port for shipping one of the largest commodities America had to offer, tobacco. And here it is hanging. This is the tobacco drying barn. It certainly doesn't smell as bad as I thought it was going to. And tobacco is really the main reason why Yorktown exists. It was exported in huge barrels like this, and then other goods were brought back in. Tobacco really was the main currency here.
This was going to pay off. The making of iron, making of glass, all these things experimented with didn't really look like it was going to be a big deal, but the tobacco prices were huge at the time, in the early years of growth, and they found out that this was perfect climate for it.
Behind me stands the Yorktown Victory Monument. It commemorates the end of the siege between the American Continental Army, their French allies and the British. But for me, it symbolises the end of my journey along the Colonial Parkway. At just over 20 miles, it is one of the shorter byways, but with a historic triangle, there's still plenty to see and do.